Hey everybody, welcome to Thru Port Collective. I'm here with my buds, pals, and co-hosts, Cryss Smith, Marshal Arnold, and myself, Tim Grogan. We're just here to talk about music, all things music, and do our show the way we like doing it, which is basically more broad topics. And while we do have sort of a focus about electronic music and synthesizers, we always seem to come back to those, but we also we really branch out from that quite a bit. We like to talk about music creation, production, recording and mixing, performance, and promotion, and kind of gather all those up. And we like hearing from you guys in the chat, and we like hearing from comments, even after the show is done. It's really cool to get some feedback, and we just like to learn from each other. We're trying to raise the bar for each other and for everyone that's interested in tuning in. So that's kind of the mission of this show. And welcome. Thanks for being here tonight. Cryss, let's go around the room here and see what everybody's been up to. Cryss, what's up?
Yeah, well, another busy week, but something came in the mail this morning, and I had gotten piano tech on Black Friday, and then in literally the 11th hour of Cyber Monday, I was presented with an amazing deal that I couldn't pass up, and it was an item that I've never owned before and that I've had on my list forever, and so I was like, geez, this is less than used prices, and I should just get it, and so I did, and it came today, and that is a Fender Precision bass. This is a 50 style. And,
lovely.
Quite lovely in seafoam green. It has a gold anodized pickguard, and played it for a little bit today before the show, and it was sounding really good in it. The thing is that I've got two other basses, the Ricky behind me and a Stingray, and so those are just total growl monsters. They just have that great nasty growl, and this is more like thumpy, and I mean, if you think of like James Jamerson, was Tim mentioned earlier, it's got that kind of sound. So I'm gonna open it up in a few days and swap out the pickup and also the tone cap, and this should be pretty fun. I mean, already just playing it a little bit was getting getting some fun tones that aren't in the realm of my other basses, so I'm hoping that'll lead me into some new directions. And the other thing I got to figure out is, like, with these kind of classic 50, 60 sounds, is like, what do I want to do when I want to have some kind of muted bass tones? And so, sliding the foam under the strings or whatever. There's some cool aftermarket devices that will sit here, and there's like a 3-position switch now that you can have it without it. Click it on, 1 for a light mute and 2 for a heavy. The Ricky has mutes built into the bridge, which is pretty nice, but the P bass, that's kind of what you think of when those old classics. So if I could do some kind of like trip hop type stuff, like classic 60s, 70s sounding influence, stuff like that, that would be really fun. So that was probably the biggest part of my week, or at least the one I was looking forward to the most.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You said you did get a chance to play with it a little bit.
Yeah, for, I don't know, about 45 minutes or so. Yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun. It plays well.
That's killer. Well, Marshall, what's happening in your world over there?
What's happening, guys?
In the Sunshine State.
Cryss had some stuff come. I had this show up today. Get that framed up there and make it big. Can you make me big, Cryss?
Oh yeah.
Make me big.
I can't see
the
the
scroll
controls.
around here.
Ooh,
Okay, there.
It's a Korg SQ64, ladies and gentlemen. This was on sale for $129. Can you believe the deal? That's amazing.
That's a great deal.
So I've not had a standalone sequencer. I don't think. Well, technically, I've got a beat step, but I use it as a controller. I don't really use the sequencer in that. So this is my first like real standalone sequencer that I'll probably try and use for some stuff. So I just got it today, though. I haven't played with it yet. I haven't even turned it on. But it seems like legit. Like it's pretty solid construction. And I don't know if anyone's used one of these, but if you have, I guess leave some comments in the chat or in the description below, or comments below after the fact. Because I don't know. I don't know yet. We'll see how it works.
So
Is it
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, sorry. Is it it does sequencing? Is that strictly what it does, or?
Yeah, well, I think it'll do. Polyphonic sequencing. I can't remember all the specs honestly because it's been out. These have been out for a while, and I think it'll record automation stuff. I don't know for sure.
Ah, that would be cool.
The thing is, for some of you ladies and gentlemen out there, it's got all these nice little. Let's see if that'll focus in there. All these little jacks so that you can do like CV gate stuff. So this will work probably really as a nice setup for modular as well.
Absolutely, that's cool. Yeah.
For that. The only thing that kind of irks me a little bit about it is it's got the little mini jacks, 3.5 millimeter jacks for MIDI, but it didn't come with the little MIDI dongles. So I don't know exactly how that's, because I think there's a couple different standards for that. I don't know what this uses.
Yeah.
Like
2.5
and 3.5 millimeter.
Yeah, I can't remember what the deal is and the differences, but I know there was a couple different versions, and I think maybe they've standardized that now, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah,
anyway, it's like if you're gonna not put a full-size MIDI port on here, you need to include the little dongle things. I think that's kind of bogus, but I can't complain too much because I did get a super sweet deal on it. What was that, Tim?
Yeah. Oh no. I was just saying it because when I got. Let's see, it was the No Coast from Make Noise. When I got that, it also has like a little, what is that? Just the mini jack. And it has a MIDI end that's just a MIDI jack. It doesn't even have a 5-pin DIN on it. So they did send, to your point, they did send the jack with it, which was cool with the female 5-pin on the other end. So that was helpful. Yeah, because otherwise, what?
Yeah, I've got two devices with those. And the maddening thing is that
come up just a little bit on your mic there, Chris. I'm sorry, it's a little quiet again.
Let me try to get up closer here. So I've got two devices that have those, and one's a Microfreak and one's the Uno drum. So the Microfreak is black and the Uno drum is white. And when I go to, they both have the other size. One's got the 2.5, one's a 3.5, so that you can't interchange them. And then the maddening thing is that I go to dig one of them out of my box of adapters and cables, and the white one that you would think would go to the Uno drum doesn't. It goes to the Microfreak, and the black one vice versa. And I always try to plug in the wrong one, like this isn't working. They're like, damn it.
I like Paul saying the dongles will cost me $199. That's why I got such a good deal on it. The dongle is the expensive part.
That's how they get you. Well, what else? And Marshall, you're still working on the live set, I know. And
yep, I've been kind of slacking a little bit, guys. I'm sorry. Working on that game thing kind of took me out of my groove a little bit.
Sure, yep.
So I need to get back into that, and we still got that intro tune we need to wrap up. So let's see if we can hopefully get that in the works this week or this weekend. I think maybe we can get that done.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, for sure. It's been a minute on that, and you've been working on the live set plus, like you said, the game trailer track and whatnot. And
yep. So it's keeping busy still, but yeah.
So do you think the SQ, what is it called? The
SQ64.
64, yeah. Do you think that will be used in your live room with the live rig?
I might end up incorporating it because one of the elements that I think I could use this for would be to do some separate sequencing. Either of different devices or drums, maybe. The thing is that since it's polyphonic, it kind of does some stuff that would be useful because where the Blue Arp, that's kind of the core of my setup, kind of doesn't work super well. Is it can be used as a sequencer, a step sequencer, but it's not going to be polyphonic that way. The polyphony comes from the actual notes that you play when you're doing arpeggiators, or if you do a MIDI through, you can play just regular chords that way, right? It just acts as a pass-through at that point. But if you're going to do sequencing through it, it's just mono. So you'd either have to use multiple tracks to get, chords that way, or implement something like this, I think. So I don't know. That's going to take some experimentation. I still kind of working out some stuff, and I got that pedal. I don't know if you guys remember that Morningstar pedal. That thing works awesome for just being able to trigger through my Ableton session or maneuver around to different clips and stuff, or scenes even. So trying to get the workflow on that dialed in, and then we'll see if this is something that I can implement into the live rig. If not, I mean, it's still a cool little thing, and I am sure I can use it for something. For 120.
Yeah, at $130. I didn't break the bank to get involved, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, S-Rabbit saying, make noise, no coast MIDI cables, the Type A 3.5 millimeter TRS to 5-pin MIDI. So they were good enough to include that. But
most of the stuff I've had that has those I've got a Uno synth and an Uno drum, and they came with them. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I think those are the only two devices other than this SQ64 now that I have that uses those little 3.5 jacks or whatever. But Cryss, you were saying there's a difference between the two.
Oh, yeah. Hey, give me a second. I'll grab them and I'll show you.
Yeah.
Well, if they're, I'm sure that obviously they're TRS. Yeah, that's the thing with a 5-pin MIDI cable. When I used to build MIDI racks for clients, I never used 5 pins because, well, for one thing, it was quite a while ago, and the other thing was just the 3 leads is all that you needed, was just center and then left and right of that. The outer leads were not used in the spec. Now, in the new spec, maybe they are going to be used, but so you really, TRS is all you needed. On the other end, but you had to have a device that was like understood that, and but I was custom building them anyway, so I could do whatever configuration I wanted for them. But that's helpful to know. Here they are.
All right, dongles.
I mean, they're basically the same thing here. But if I can get these close up here,
they're both TRS.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's a fat boy
but you got a fat boy and a skinny boy.
Yeah, so a larger one,
that fat ass on there.
like the Micro Freak here, is a 3.5, and then whatever this size is, 2.5 or something
probably,
for the Uno drum.
Yeah. My Uno drum's a little one like that? I didn't even notice. Probably because I don't think I've done much with the Uno drum.
Well, the 3.5, that's the Eurorack standard and all of that, so that's, at least that one makes sense. I don't know.
I'm kind of find it annoying that there isn't, that there's different types. And I think I'm even more annoyed that these exist in the first place, because just put a regular jack on it, guys.
Yeah, I just think it's the PC board or whatever, and it doesn't allow for the room to do it.
Yeah, I get that, but just make it anything smaller, and then you can fit,
that much thicker. Yeah, that seems to be that's a bigger. I'm with you, Marshall. That's a bigger criteria, I think, for other people than it is for me. That it needs to be tiny, really profile wise, everything wise, just footprint wise, small. And I don't mind something a little bit bigger. I get it in terms of just straight up spatial relation, right? But it doesn't bother me if it's a little bit bigger, especially if it's got the shit on it you need,
Oh yeah, I don't mind a big chunky piece of gear.
So yeah, interesting. Well, that's cool.
It's interesting. I mean, things have gone completely the other way in that, in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, they would take these very small circuits, the classic fuzz face pedal, like what Jimi Hendrix used. It's 2 transistors, I don't know, 8 resistors, a couple pots, and some 4 or 5 caps or something. I mean, you can fit it on a postage stamp, pretty much.
Right.
And they would come in this large enclosure, big, large foot pedal enclosure, or the old Electro Harmonix pedals, same thing. It's just mostly empty space in that box. And I don't know if it was people felt like they were getting more for their money because it was this big, huge thing, to put on the floor. But, now we've kind of gone the opposite where, Apple's removed the headphone jacks because they want to
Right.
shrink everything down, and same thing with these companies. Like, that's got to be super small. Like,
yeah, but the phones are the same thickness. They could still fit a jack on there.
Yeah.
Jerks about it. Like, you can put that on there, and people can decide then if they want to use a. Because here's the thing. Like, I know, like, when I go on like a plane trip, and I take my phone, I would prefer to plug in a set of headphones because I've got some nice in-ears that fit really well, but they're cabled. They're not Bluetooth.
Mm-hmm.
So now, even with this is my Samsung S22 Ultra or whatever, I have to use a little USB-C dongle to 3.5 millimeter, and it's just a pain.
Yeah.
I'm on here for that jack. There's no reason to not have it.
I think from a functional standpoint, though, I mean, it could be argued that having another jack on there is just another point of failure.
Yeah, but I mean, most people get rid of their phones within a couple of years anyway.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about.
Not like they're using them for
out with the
years.
old, in with the new.
Yeah. What have you been up to, Tim?
Man, it's been an interesting day. Let's see. I have a gig coming up on December 17th. It's a solo show for me to do a live synth performance, and I'm with two other artists. It's kind of a cool thing. It's a Saturday night. It's kind of a big night. We're sponsored by Toys for Tots, which is really cool. So It's for a good cause, and we got a bunch of people coming out. Well, today I learned from the sound engineer that the club may have double booked us. So.
Oh.
Yeah, and I've been, posting a bunch about it and trying to get a little excitement about it, and also personally working very hard on my live rig and writing an hour's worth of music because I'm supposed to fill up an hour, and I don't have that just lying around. In fact, I don't have really anything lying around that I could use. So especially it's a new rig for me back here.
Yeah.
So learning it and writing an hour's worth of music and spending a lot of time on that, only to find out today that it may be double booked. So that was one interesting turn of events today.
So when they say double booked, so they scheduled another event at the same time you guys were already supposed to use the space?
They did. In fact, we had booked it early October. We've been on the books since early October, and somewhere after that, they booked a band, and it's a big thing for this band because it's their record release show, and they have an agent that they went through to book it, and it's a big deal, right? And I'm sure they've spent a lot of money, and their timing needs to be right. And I mean, I understand all of that.
They're going to boot you guys, even though you reserved.
So they're going to boot us, and also, guitars went over synths, so. It does. It does. As well, especially in this town, man. Like, guitar is king, no doubt. But so we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't think we're going to be able to keep it, though. I think they're going to boot us for sure, and then I don't know. I don't even know if I want to do the show after that because that's lame. And we were on the books first. Honestly, both acts have done a lot of work, and a lot of groundwork, and I get it, but like we were on there first, and that should be the criteria. That's pretty much the standard thinking when you're double booked on a live gig. That's the standard thinking. Yeah, who's been on the books first? That's where it should go, because the other one was a mistake and an after move. So, but we'll see how all that goes. And then let's see. The XPO. They call it prismatic oscillator from Make Noise. I had that ordered since August. It has been on back order, and they just haven't been able to produce very many of them.
Oh, that's too bad. In
this current setting, and it's very cool, but it's got stereo. It's a super badass module, and I'm excited to get it, but it shipped today. So I hadn't heard anything other than we're backlogged and sorry. But today it shipped.
You know what's the... I forgot to mention this last week. The other thing that's been kind of out for a long time, not out, but been in the works for a long time, like years, is that Expressive E thing. Mm-hmm. You guys remember that?
Yeah, the MPE keyboard.
MPE Poly Aftertouch mechanical keyboard. they're getting close to shipping finally. I pre-ordered one of those. This was before COVID even. I mean, this is how long ago it was.
Yeah.
They're finally getting around to start shipping here pretty soon, I think, on those. So sorry, Tim. I just wanted to...
No, you're good. You're good. And then one other thing happened that made it an interesting day. And this thing, which is also, they stopped producing them for a while, and now they made a batch of them. This is the LFE. So this is a...
oh, yeah. That's the one that Jamie had on his channel, right?
Right. That's where I first saw it, actually.
Yeah.
It was on Jamie's channel, and it just adds 3 LFOs and an envelope and a sequencer, actually, and then patch management and all kinds of business. This one, I went ahead and ordered it full blown because I've learned about myself that if I don't do that, I'll regret not having one of the features later.
I'm going to tip that up a little bit or something. Can't quite. Well, I mean, it's just really dark.
It's just really dark. Anyway.
Tell us what's on there.
Yeah. The main thing is that it's got CV in and CV out here, which is cool. That's mostly what I was trying to show with that. But there's Cryss, we could bring that photo up, or either one of you guys, that I have in the screen share.
Okay, yeah, I'll bring it up.
If we want to just have a quick look at it. Yeah, there it is. So now, I mean, there's a better look at it. But yeah, it stores everything, and it stores all the settings with the patch. And I had mine kind of customized to resemble the OB6 because that was an option, and that's mostly where I'm going to use it. But you can use it with the OBX8 and other synths as well. Well, Prophet 5, Prophet 10, Prophet 6. I know you can use it with all of those and customize it. So it's a very cool thing to add some color, because we all probably want that extra LFO sometimes.
And they did a good job of making it match the OB6 as well.
It looks great. Really, the only obvious difference is that the knobs are shiny rather than sort of matte. On the OB6, they're kind of matte finish. But, I mean, whatever. It's great. Prologue 2. So, yeah. Anyway, that came today. I'm excited. I haven't had a chance to do it. And speaking of things that don't come with it, it did not come with a power supply intentionally. So how about that? But
that's a little worse.
I mean, but here's the deal. He
turned it on.
Because it's kind of odd, right? Because a lot of places anyway, he was doing it just to cut down on costs, is what he said, because of the different standards with different nations, obviously. So he said, just, here's the requirements, no big deal. And it's a standard type power supply for us in the U.S. But I guess that's why he decided to cut down on $199 for the power supply, says Paul.
Paul got it down. He knows that.
I'm telling you. Paul has been drugged through that one before, hasn't he? Wow. Well, so and that's pretty much it on my end. So we have a great topic this week. It's an interesting one, I think, and let's transition on into that before we get too much further. And that's about your creative space and your safe zone and your comfort zone in particular, and how that feels. Where is yours, and how do you get through it? How often do you get through it? Why do you want to get through it? Does it work when you do? We just thought that would be a fun, broad topic. I know I've been dealing with it a lot lately, and so I kind of threw it out there as an option. And hopefully you guys in the chat and everybody else watching the show will find discussion about your comfort zone, your musical comfort zone, and when you get in it, when you get past it, and what do you do with it? What does it mean to you? So let's see. Go ahead, Cryss.
When I was making the thumbnail, it was just searching for stuff about comfort zone. And it was hilarious because there's tons of comfort zone memes out there, and a lot along the lines, I can't remember any of the lines out of them. They're funny, and it's like I stepped and went outside of my comfort zone in it, and then it's like, and then it hurt, stuff like that, which is true, and which is the reason that we don't like to do it, because it's always pain and it's always stress. And, especially if you spend some time working on an instrument or music or whatever, you get to start feeling like, oh, I've kind of achieved something and this is all right. And then you're like, well, I'll just add a little bit more to this. And you start working on something else and then you feel like a beginner again. You're like, I've already dealt with this. I don't want to come back to this.
Well, exactly. And then you're saying to yourself, and I did this to myself. Yeah. that pain was intentional. I am putting myself through all kinds of hell in order to hopefully achieve growth and then a new standard.
Yeah.
But like in the process, good grief, what am I doing? Yeah. Well, and that's just trying to get this show together and trying to do an hour set live and just use Modular and the KeyStep Pro and then Machine Plus. That's my setup, and so I've been really battling with that. And but my comfort zone would have been to say, don't do that. Don't don't do that. Don't put yourself in that sort of a position. Maybe learn the thing and do a track. Make a track with the rig, but don't push yourself out the first time you're using it to go play for an hour. And the last, and it's honestly, it's the second time I tried to use it because the first time was epic fail. So while I was pushing my comfort zone and trying to learn stuff and make myself a better performer and more valuable in a lot of ways, right, as a live artist, complete failure. And I think I had told you guys that story, but briefly it had to do with power requirements there at the what was a hotel we were playing at, and what was available, and that rig being brand new to me, and me throwing a bunch of modules in a brand new rack with Machine Plus, which I'd never used on its own, driving the whole thing in that way. So that was my initial comfort zone push for this rig anyway. There have been plenty, but that one was for this rig, and dude, like, there it was, just right in my face. Epic fail. I didn't play all night. I couldn't get my rig to work, and everyone else did. But I don't think if I had pushed myself that far, if I hadn't have done that, I don't think I would be trying this yet again, and in a like for an hour set now. Maybe I'm just a glutton. Maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or whatever. But
it's like looking over the edge of the Coliseum, like I see that there's lions down in that arena. Do you mind giving me a push? No, wait, hold on. I'll throw myself over. You survive it. You come up mangled again, and you're like, I'm going to do that again if you don't mind. Well, let me ask you this, because David brings up this. It's hard when you're trying to push yourself and still be productive. For this experience that you had of the first show and then planning for the second, I really like that he said this, because it does point out it's like you don't feel productive because the normal pace of what you do has been slowed to a halt because you're doing new stuff. Do you feel like even within that process of these two shows that like has it been productive for you? Have you walked away with things that you've learned from the experience?
And that's just a great question, and I sort of had a sub question along that same line about when do you know when not to stretch too far, or when not to press the comfort zone. So those are sort of interrelated questions, but for that one, I would say it's not necessarily an immediate goal, or rather an immediate realization. It's not. You don't put yourself out there in a really difficult situation with that and immediately walk away enlightened like the Buddha about what you were trying to do. You're going to gain a certain amount of info. And that is going to push your whole scene forward, right? But like on this one, I've learned a lot, but it's been incremental, and I think that's the thing to remember. Even though the push outside the comfort zone for me personally in these instances has been extreme, I wouldn't say that my learning has been proportionate. I mean, it is incrementally getting there, but I think it has taken my doing that or trying that to even gain some of the increments. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a one-for-one return, I don't think. I think you have to push yourself into place, and then you kind of figure some stuff out.
Like logarithmic or whatever, right? Where it starts out very, very slow, but
yes,
it incrementally can improve, but it can take a long time to get to that point at the same time.
Yeah. So it's kind of a torturous process, isn't it? I mean, and we all do it, and we all ask, why the hell am I doing this sometimes of ourselves? And then after it's done, we can usually look back with some hindsight, being 2020, and go, oh, okay, here's what I learned, here are the rewards I got, and that's why we do it. That's why we all do it, right?
Yeah, it is really a delayed gratification, and that's something that's not comfortable, because when we get into our routines and like within music making, we're doing the things that we know how to do. It's easy, it can get done pretty fast, and at that point, like when you reach that point of like, oh, I finished a song or I've released it or whatever, then the rewards are pretty quick. And with pushing outside your comfort zone, because it necessarily involves new territory and new things to learn, which slows you way the heck down. It's like you are embarking on a journey in which the rewards of it are not coming until maybe significantly later, and that's one of those things. So like, how do you keep your head in that game when the rewards aren't coming? I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I can say that I've pushed myself here lately trying to get into the whole live performance thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've wanted to do a long time but have never done. I've been mostly, in the box, or not in the box, but like in the studio production, that type of thing. So going to that has been pretty frustrating, and I can empathize with Tim a bit. Although Tim's gone from like working with his rig, getting his performance down, going out and actually performing it in front of people. I haven't even gotten to the getting anything really like solid to work with yet. I keep just messing with it, and I can concur a little bit with Tim, where it's like, why am I doing this to myself? But sometimes putting those restrictions, saying I'm only going to use these certain instruments and I'm going to try and make this work. There's something about that makes you get creative again. Because sometimes when you're sitting in a room like this where you got all kinds of stuff, I have over like 50 synths. I don't have a whole lot of worry about not getting the right thing.
Uh-huh.
So, but trying to narrow that stuff down into a little live setup, that's been very challenging for me. So I've been way out on a limb there.
Mm.
Yeah, that's actually really a great point too, Marshall. That's very cool. Like you forced yourself into new territory to sort of pare down and make something happen, and make it happen in a live setting.
Yeah. Trying to do something that I've kind of always wanted to do. So, but to the point of how far is too far, well, I don't know that you really know, because that would require you to know things that you don't know. It's like that whole thing about the known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, that whole
right
thing.
Circular.
It's like that, right? Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you've really gone too far until you try and fail.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And my sort of question was really more, when do you know when not to stretch or when not to get out of your comfort zone? When do you know when not to do that? Because not everything you do should be pushing you out of your comfort zone, right?
That's true. Well, there are times where if I'm working on, let's say I'm working on like a track and I'm trying something kind of new, and I feel like maybe this is a little too out there, I'll pull it back. Mm-hmm. I'll bring it back into the comfort zone a little bit if I feel like it's getting a little out of hand.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm getting at too. Yeah, and like as a session drummer, when I get hired on a session, they're in general not asking me to reinvent the wheel. They want me to go in there and kill it in a solid kind of way and not necessarily be out of my comfort zone or out of theirs.
Right.
They're not wanting that sort of experimentation. They want me to come in, do a specific job, be the assassin and kill it and then be done. So
Yeah.
that I was thinking of that, and because that's how that's when I know not to get outside of my comfort
And
zone.
well, and not only that, like I think like as musicians, like sometimes you kind of know when it's getting away from you a little too much.
Absolutely.
Like I think you just kind of know. You're like, this isn't really working.
Yeah.
Bring this back a little bit.
Yeah.
What
like
I know works.
with what you said there, Tim, about, this is the job I've got to do with the thing that I do. And it just kind of reminded me. So like, I grew up, my mom hated to cook. So I had to fend for myself. I had to cook for myself and do all that kind of stuff. And I hate cooking just because I had to do it all the time, but I do it well. And when my wife and I got married, her dad did all the cooking, so she didn't have to cook, and therefore she enjoyed it but didn't really know how to do it that well. But she's a little more adventurous than I am, and she's interested in having new experiences. And so we would say if we were invited somewhere, somebody's house for a meal or whatever, and then she'd go like, oh yeah, I'll make the dessert. And then she'd end up trying, every time that we would go out, she ended up trying a new recipe. And, she's already, at that point, was already extending, her abilities. Like, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to try to figure it out. And then when there was other people involved in the situation, she would start getting frustrated towards the end of like, these aren't coming out really good. And to me, I was like, well, why didn't you cook the thing that you already knew how, or bake the thing that you already knew how to bake, instead of trying something new? But like, oh, I wanted to try these. And I think that it kind of was the picture that I had when you were talking about that, Tim, like, knowing, having some of that wisdom to know when to do what. And sometimes it depends on, here's where working by ourselves, working for ourselves versus working in a context that we're being hired or we're working with a band, and then knowing, what kind of effect will this have on myself and the people around me. And so, I think in band situations, I was, here's the things that we do really well, and we got to work on them. And if we have time, if we get ahead, then let's work on that more experimental stuff. And, I was in this kind of Toolish type band in the 2000s, and like just heavy rock, kind of proggish but heavy. And so like we wrote some songs that were like our style, the thing that we did. And then when we got ahead on those and we were like, okay, we've got a set of songs and we're doing all right, then we tried like the thing that was a little beyond our grasp and that we would have to take time to learn how to do. And so we started working on the song that was in 13/8, I think. It was ridiculous, and it was such a pain in the butt to try to count that out and work the riffs out and all that kind of stuff. And that was the type of thing where I think like if we had started somewhere towards the beginning and started to do that, it would have stopped us. It would have slowed us down. We hadn't yet built the rapport with one another to be able to do that and to work efficiently as we could have if we had done it earlier. But since we had waited, we had already had other stuff under our belt, the things that are within our wheelhouse that we could get going and rolling, and it would help build the connections in the band so that when you get to one of those places where you have the opportunity to go, oh, I'm going to go a little bit further out here, let's explore this thing and see if this is us, and do something kind of crazy, then like everything else was built up to support that. But then also you need to have the time for it, because that's the thing, is when it's slowing you down. Do I have the time to do this? And if I'm working on my own, like I can take whatever time I want. I don't have to put anything out. I'm doing this because I love it. So I don't have to worry about that. But the moment that I'm working with other people in a band situation or I'm being hired, as like you said, Tim, like that's when I start thinking like, okay, I really want to incorporate this new stuff, these whatever into my rig. Maybe now's not the time to do that. Let's get through this next gig. And then when I have time on my own, I'll see how it works out. And then, show up being able to fully implement the things that will take a little more work to do.
And it's interesting you say that, I think, because it's sometimes, though, paid work can push you, too, outside of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced that a little bit with that game trailer track, where I was asked to do something that I don't normally do or don't really know how to do.
Absolutely, man.
In situations like that, it can also have the opposite, where it pushes you out of your comfort zone, too. So,
yeah.
You stepped outside of your comfort zone when you said yes.
Right.
Really, like that's where it started.
Well,
because you knew, yeah.
Well, so here's what happened, though. So they didn't come out and say that initially. So what happened was they told me kind of what they wanted, minus they didn't mention any of the dubstep stuff until after I kind of submitted some stuff that I was working on. And they were like, oh, we really like this. Oh, by the way, can you just go ahead and add some dubstep into this? And I was like, I will try. So it was kind of one of those things where it was not clearly stated up front exactly that they wanted that until after. So
yeah,
they would have said, we want you to make some dubstep hybrid thing. I would have been like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for that,
But because you were already in it and I had already said yes,
and I'd already spent time working on something, and so I went ahead and gave it a shot.
Absolutely. I mean, but yeah, you put yourself in that position, and you don't. I mean, no, really, like because you wanted the growth and you wanted the challenge, mm-hmm. and if you hadn't have done that, when you put yourself in a position like that there's a lot of X factors, and so you kind of know that going in. You don't know what they're going to be yet. You just know.
Well, I may spend a bunch of time on something, send it to them. They're like, well, can you just actually start over from scratch?
Yeah,
because you
exactly.
don't really like what you're doing there.
Yeah.
And that, there's always that risk, or that you put in all that effort and they decide to go and do something else completely and just, not even use anything you've worked on. So,
right, they could go a completely different direction. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
And then your comfort zone is like that you're out of is dealing with rejection, basically.
Right.
Because that's not easy. You can really take that personally, and it's not necessarily meant that way at all. But I mean, that's been my experience. Is just I'll do my best work, and I think I'm hitting the mark about what they're asking for, and they'll say, it's just not what we were thinking. So sorry,
Yeah.
And then you're dangling outside of the comfort zone, just kind of raw. And hanging there just like a piece of raw meat going, okay, I'll just slunk going back into my cave.
I'll just go ahead and step into oncoming traffic now. Thanks.
But that makes it harder being the sole person to have to do it and to kind of expand. And that's where it'd been easier to do it in band situations where sometimes getting hired and they're like, oh, well, can you cover this style? And I'm like, well, crap, I've never played that before. But like, there's 4 or 5 other people in the band. I'm like, all right, let's see how this goes. And then being able to kind of fit into that and be listening and kind of pull in and, draw upon at least what little you've listened to that genre to kind of pull something out of it. Whereas like what you're talking about with the composing for the video game, that's a lot harder situation where it's just all coming down to you. There's nobody else to lean on or, to sit in context. Because usually you can kind of get away with stuff in a band context. Yeah. I mean, maybe not as much so for Tim as a drummer, but I can say as like a lead guitar player, it was always a lot easier to kind of be a chameleon and kind of move and shift when I needed to shift. But that's a lot harder thing when you're the sole composer.
And I would also say that in a band situation, you also have other individuals with who could potentially have the experience necessary to accomplish whatever X factor that is, you know.
Exactly, and just the moral support of it too, right? Like you're in a group of people. Somebody's going to figure this out, and you're collaborating. You're not just on a desert island just staring at a blank sheet of paper going, what do I write? You've got other people there to have some. Huh?
Piece of paper? What's that?
It's what you have on a desert island.
Right.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, you've got some paper and a pen.
That washed up. But yeah, I mean, exactly. It's a lot more daunting and a scary thing to bite off, to do something all on your own like that. So that's been a huge growth spurt, I would imagine, for you in a lot of ways, right? Marshall, what are your specific takeaways now, basically having done it?
Actually, it went better than I kind of thought, honestly, because when I was asked to do this, I wasn't given any footage. There's no gameplay. There's nothing. Like, this is like, they just said, they gave me some keywords and some examples of other music that they kind of thought this should kind of be like. And I just kind of ran with that, with what I thought worked. And I find that pretty challenging also, because when you're doing something like a trailer, it makes more sense to me to do the music after. Mm-hmm. Once you've got something cut, like a lot of times, like directors and stuff, they'll use a piece of temp music to cut the trailer, and then they'll go to their composer or whoever and say, can you make something that'll work with this? And then you do, and then that's what you end up with. So to do that without really any kind of visuals or anything already cut together for points, like, what do you call that? Like flow, like to see how it's going to flow, how the trailer's going to flow, or any of that. That's the challenging part, I think, with that.
I would think that the pacing of the song to the video, that would be a very hard thing to do without it, because you don't know if this is like how fast it's moving, how intense and quick things are shifting, or if it needs, if you have a long, slow, scene within this trailer or whatever, you don't want to be that stuff going on, like you're going in blind.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a cool example of something very similar to that worked out extremely well, and that was Hans Zimmer when he did the score for Interstellar. I don't know if he did this for everything, but the director asked him he gave him like kind of like what these folks did. They gave me like some keyword kind of things like to kind of go off of, but didn't show him any footage or anything. And I think there's a couple interviews of him talking about this, and he came up with this like very beautiful like piano thing that was used, I think, in between him and the daughter. Mm-hmm. If anyone's seen Interstellar, and it worked out really well. So in some ways, it can work out, I guess, going the other way.
Yeah, I mean, inspiration can happen like that, and there are times where unexpected things happens. One of my favorite things, and if you guys have heard of this, is Dark Side of the Rainbow.
Yeah.
You guys, yeah. So what it is I don't know when it came about.
That Pink Floyd thing or something? Or?
Yeah. So you take the movie The Wizard of Oz, and I think it's at the end of the third MGM Lion Roar, and you start the Dark Side of the Moon album, and it just has a way of syncing up, not only musically and rhythmically, but the lyrics sync up as well in a really unusual way. I mean, the album's only something like 42 minutes or something long, so it doesn't go the whole movie, but it's just a fascinating thing anyway. But the point that I'm making is that some of those scenes within The Wizard of Oz took on a whole new meaning and had a really interesting vibe when you radically changed the music. And so, for instance, in the beginning of the movie with the tornado scene, still in black and white, cows are flying around and all that kind of stuff, and it's the most like chaotic scene of the film, and that's right at the point where on the album it's The Great Gig in the Sky, which if you've heard the album is this really beautiful piece, and it's kind of a slow, it's a Pink Floyd thing, and they've got this woman that's singing over it, and it's just puts this whole like really crazy spin on it. No pun intended. I mean, with the tornado and all, but it just puts this whole different spin on it that's very like surreal and beautiful, that you're listening to this music as all this chaos is going around you. And so, I mean, there are those moments where, music, the opposite kind of thing is to what we would expect, and music would come last. But sometimes, music can put a new interpretation on something that's already there.
That's really being outside of the comfort zone too for the composer.
Yeah.
If that's, and I've seen that done a lot, because the juxtaposition is the very thing now that gives it this whole other, as you said, sort of meaning. And it's not what you would expect. And I think I've heard interviews with Thomas Newman and, multiple composers where they said, I thought this was the right thing, and I went ahead and stuck it in there, and the director either said no, or in the best case, they said, let me live with that for a second. But I don't think directors, especially on that level, Hollywood, big film kind of level, I don't think that directors tend to say, yeah, sure, let me live with it for a little bit and I'll see if I like it or not. I think it gets the axe right away, so that's a great example too, Cryss, of just another of being outside of your comfort zone and the payoff that you could potentially have, because the thing to normally do would be to match the action with the music,
I think, in the context of it, like if you were doing that and you had to submit it to George Lucas, I would be a lot more concerned about that than if I was submitting it to David Lynch,
Right.
There's at least some chance, like you're like, well, maybe this will be something that will spark something new and he'll go in a new direction, but you would expect it towards, maybe more of a somebody that's a little more experimental would be able to go for that, versus what you were talking about, like, the director is like, no, we're going this way. I have my vision. This is what it is. Get in line with it.
Yeah.
That would be the harder thing to then perform for a person like that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And just the comfort zone of that would be, I can't imagine sort of what the pressure feels like I can imagine, but like what the pressure must be like, by the way, to be ballsy enough as a composer to go in and go, this is really working in my brain, and it's really kind of dangerous for me to throw that out there, but I'm going to do it, like that's ballsy. Wow.
Well, I mean, look at your two projects. I mean, that takes some balls, because they're like, Marshall signed up, signed on to do this game trailer, and Tim, you had a gig where you're using all new gear and you've got an hour of music to, come up with. Like, those are both very ballsy moves. It just shows some confidence in your skills, that you're like, I have some chance of pulling this off, even if it's by the skin of my teeth. I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to do it. And there's, I think Marshall was saying too, like there is something in the challenge of it that may help us attain higher heights, if not.
I can say though, in the example of mine, the thing is that I if somebody asks me, like if somebody gives me a piece of music and they say, can you make something that's like this? Mm-hmm. I don't know that I can do that necessarily. Like, I can't really sound like something else. Like in some ways maybe, but like just straight out like copying like certain styles, like I don't know. Like I have a hard time doing that. There's some people that are great at it. Mm-hmm. They can hear some songs and then just reproduce like the style, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm not very good at that at all. So I had to go in and tell these people, I'm like, listen, this is what I can do. Listen to some of my stuff. Okay, don't come back and ask me to sound like something else, because it's probably not going to work out. But then, of course, they asked me to do some stuff that I wasn't really good at, but I think it turned out well. But yeah, I can't be a copycat or like, and it's not that like if I could do that, because you can make a career out of that. Honestly, whatever the trend is, you can if you can copy that and get it down and make it sound like whatever, then you can make a lot of money doing that, I think. But I just can't. I'm not good at that at all.
So that's a great example of, overall knowing where your comfort zone is, but also knowing when it's not really even a matter of comfort zone now anymore. We're sort of out of that realm into the realm of that doesn't work for me, and you know it.
Right. That's impossible for me.
It's a brick wall boundary. You're just like, I just know that's going to be failure for me. I can't do that. And so that's a super interesting and mature, realization to have.
It's a situation where I wanted them to be aware. Like, I'm not just somebody that you can come to and say, make it sound like this, and it's going to sound just like that. No, that's not going to happen with me. So I just wanted them to be aware of that, Because some people, I've had people ask me, can you make something like this? And you're kind of like, no, like,
right.
I can't do that. So find somebody that makes stuff like that then.
Yeah. And you knew yourself well enough to know that would be an absolute failure, or it's just not going to happen. So It wasn't a matter of comfort zone in your consideration. That didn't even exist.
Right. Luckily, like what they were looking for actually is mostly in my wheelhouse, And I did have to step out a little bit to add some of these other elements, but it wasn't. And I let them know, like, this is going to be sprinkled in. Like, you're not going to get this crazy amalgamation, because I don't do the other stuff at all. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. So the best I can do is sprinkle in some elements for you, and hopefully that's good enough, because doing that in itself was a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was part of the biggest challenge of that project for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Part of it, I mean, saying yes to doing it at all, of course.
Yeah, and it's always scary, like when you're doing something like this, and you don't know exactly, like, you have an idea of what they want because they've given you some examples, but like when you actually submit your final, like, this is it, is this gonna work? And you're just kind of like, hopefully they don't hate it,
Yeah. Well, and I think pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, the way you learn to do that too, because it is sort of a calculated move. Again, because you're not putting yourself in a position you absolutely believe you're going to fail in or not be able to deliver.
Right, that's one thing you don't want to do. I think that's where, like,
it's just
you could push yourself thinking that you could do something. And some people thrive on that too, though. You know what I mean? Some people love the challenge of saying yes to stuff that they have no idea how they'll accomplish it. And that not just in music, just in general. Like, there's massive companies that have been formed all because somebody said yes to something that they had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, it's super risky. I mean, and the payoffs it's just like whatever. I guess it's like the stock market, or it's like life, basically. Sometimes the bigger risks have bigger payoffs. And in fact, a lot of the time they do. And smaller risks, maybe just, you just get a smaller payoff. But that's why I think a lot of people want to take those bigger risks, is because the payoff is so potentially gigantic. If somebody came to you and said, I'm going to pay you $100,000 now to actually make this song sound like this, then you might be, maybe money spins it a little bit or something, whatever, and you go, sure, I'll try it.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe. I'm just using that as a hypothetical, but
if somebody's going to give me a good chunk of change to do something, I will become an expert.
I will try it.
Either that, or I'll buy a bunch of sample packs off the internet.
Yeah, well, or hire someone else to do it and say you did it. Get a ghostwriter, ghostwriter. And just pay them. Yep, you agree to this? Great, good. My name goes on it at the end. Yep. Okay, good. Here we go.
Here's your $50. Thanks.
It's just like it just depends, doesn't it? So it's just
Yeah.
funny, like how the comfort zone, like where the end of that is, and when you know to get into it or not, or when you know to go even way beyond, like just like to that point of, oh, I don't think I can do this. That's dangerous. That's dangerous territory. I don't do too much of that, but for the most part, for my, it's when I push out of my comfort zone, it usually pays off. I don't guess I've.
That's good. Yeah.
For the most part, it has, and then there's gigantic failures in there too, and you have to. Then I have to look back at myself and go, well, I mean, you put yourself out there. You can't really blame anybody else for and be too hard on yourself because you felt like you could do this. And
Yeah.
that's a weird place to live in, because you're a lot of it, despite you not sure. I think I can do this. It's a kind of a weird place to live in, but it's a healthy place because that's how we learn and grow.
That's the only way, honestly.
Right, is to deviate from the norm, right, and get out of your comfort zone, rather. Not your zone, get in your zone. But yeah, that's how you learn.
I was thinking about something. Well, it's kind of been a running thought for the last few weeks, and hadn't really just needed to think it out. But I was thinking today. So in terms of going outside your comfort zone. So in a different, just in a slightly different direction here for a moment, in regards to gear. And I went many years where synthesizers were a very periphery thing. Just not in the main thing of what I did. It was all guitar and bass. And I was thinking about how things have changed because I spend so much time with synthesizers now and put a great deal of time on as far as the technology of things. I spent a lot more time on technical aspects of synthesizers right now than I do, say, with guitar. And one of the things I was thinking about is I was getting a little frustrated because, for instance, I've got a Essence FM sitting in my rack here, which I've done some programming on, have some wonderful patches. I like it. And, but it's, another type of synthesis and, not only a different synthesizer, but, a different type of synthesis. And so it takes a little bit longer to get in there and I'm not somebody that thinks that FM is unattainable. Actually, if you have a good interface, it's pretty easy to work with. It's just a little bit different concepts. And so you kind of get the muscle memory working at it a different way. But one thing that I notice in a comparison is many years of going through different guitar equipment. And if I got something different, there's a little bit of time where you have to kind of stretch and learn this new thing. If you're used to playing vintage Fender amps and then all of a sudden you've got a Marshall or a Mesa Boogie or something, you got to kind of shift gears and cover that. But one of the things I was thinking is with all these gear, two of my purchases here was my Rocky Strat and this Precision bass. And the amount of time it takes to stretch out and get that stuff, it's that's just another Strat, just different paint job. And this is the bass, and its configuration, its tone's a little bit different, but it's still a bass, and it still plays basically like my other basses. And that was one of the things I was thinking about is when it comes to synthesizers, there's this whole other thing where all the basics are the same. We all know, I know the three of us do, and most everybody in the chat, we can make sounds on synthesizers, but it's interesting that that time of learning and making it work the way that you want to work is usually a little bit longer than it is for something like guitar or drums. Because I'd imagine, Tim, that you get a different drum set, it's okay, yeah, things are a little bit different, sounds a little bit different. I play a little bit more this way, but pretty much you're just doing it. You're from moment one, you're like, okay, yeah, I've got a DW and I've got a vintage Gretsch. Okay, it's going to be pretty much the same thing, Whereas like, well, I've been playing this Mini Moog, and now I'm going to play a 2600 or a Memory Moog or something, and like the amount of time that gets put into stretching yourself is a little bit longer, and I'm finding like that's good, that's fun, and it pushes you into new musical ground, but also just like with all these other comfort zone things, it does slow you down quite a bit, at least for me compared to guitars. I don't know what you guys think about that stuff.
Well, I can tell you that that Essence FM is pretty cool. It's got a good interface on it. As we're kind of talking in the chat, FM can really be the bane of your existence with a terrible interface, like on the I don't know, DX7 maybe. Yeah. So modern FM,
like, we need to ring a bell every time that happens.
So like, and those are the bad limitations, right? Where you have a hard time actually understanding how to get in and get into the nuts and bolts of the instrument that you're trying to program for. Like that like, you don't want that. You don't want those kind of challenges, I think. And the nice thing with modern computers and stuff is that FM, which can be fairly complex, is a lot easier and more obtainable in a GUI in a plugin or on something with a screen like the Essence FM. I mean, what's your experience with it? Do you like programming on that, Cryss?
Yeah, I mean, this has a nice interface. There's a few things that I wish it did a little bit differently, or there's a few convenience features that are oddly missing. But it's a pretty easy way to program, and it's a good way to kind of get into it. Like with FM programming, I think it also is kind of the same as other styles like subtractive and whatnot, in that you can really spend a lot of time learning and understanding the concepts behind it, and understanding why there are ratios and how modulators affect the carrier and things like that. But it's interesting, like since the Op6 has come out, how many people that don't know anything about FM at all, like theoretically just make sounds on it by moving knobs. So
yeah, but see, that's in a way I think that's kind of good, because it makes it a little less intimidating for FM, because if you look at a DX7, it's got one slider for data entry on it.
Yeah.
And then you got to go through all these stupid menus and memorize it's a freaking nightmare. All right. So having something that you can actually tweak live and get some decent results on out of the box is pretty damn cool, I think, for FM.
Yeah, it speeds it up quite a bit.
Speeds it up, and it's a lot more fun, right? It's a lot more enjoyable in that way. But if you want a really good interface, like if you got really comfortable, let's say you start out with something like that, like an Op6, and it gets you kind of interested in FM, you get something like Cirrus, or Citrus, I think is what it's called. It's an FM plugin. I think it came with Fruity Loops, but you can get it by itself, and then has the perfect interface for FM, where it's a matrix of knobs, and you can modulate anything into anything else kind of thing. And it's like, that's exactly how FM like an interface for FM should be, is just a bunch of knobs, and you start turning different stuff. I think that's like perfect.
Yeah. There needs to be something that says jump in, the water's fine.
Right.
Because otherwise it's pretty daunting, intimidating, and I don't want to sit there and be a super math head while I'm trying to, be creative sonically. I don't want to have to necessarily be wearing both of those hats at the same time. I want the other to be like, or just already in my brain, where I'm not having to think about that, as well as, get the sound I want, or get a sound that's cool.
So, one of the things I think with it, and Manny Fernandez said something about this, and it's kind of what I feel like my experience has been also is everything is, it becomes muscle memory. And FM is no different. It's just that, like with a lot of our first synthesizers, they weren't FM. And so like my first synthesizer was a Juno 106, and I didn't have the internet, and I had no friends that had any actual real synthesizers. Played with some guys that had Romplers but didn't know how to do anything with them. They just played presets. So I was sitting there, and it may have as been a DX7 or something, because I just have an interface. Now, I mean, a Juno's as simple as can be, but it's like, well, if you've never programmed a synthesizer, you're just looking like, well, there's, what is these funny shapes, and what's an envelope generator, and, a VCA and a VCF, those are just initials to me. But the thing is, like, you sit and you play with it and you learn what it does, and it just you intuitively figure it out. And it's an interesting thing. And the same thing happens for FM too. Like, you can make good sounds on it without knowing the technical theory of it, because you can figure out stuff if you're willing to put in the time. And if the interface is fast enough for you to do it in a way that you don't get bored of it, compare the Traction FM or the Kodomo Essence FM, like, where they're fast enough that you can actually, or the Op6, you can make something that sounds good that will keep you going and keep you learning at it, versus the DX7 and its one encoder. So there is that thing. I mean, I watched a very interesting TED Talk where this guy was doing these experiments. And so, I don't know, this is maybe like 15, 20 years ago. He would put a PC in some sort of weatherproof box, but the interface was out in the open in the middle of a remote village, Mongolia and places like that, where children had never seen technology. And so he put it out there in English. They didn't speak the language. They didn't know what a computer was. They had no frame of reference for what this thing would do. And so he had a camera on it, I think, and he would check in on it from time to time at these different places. And the interesting thing is that after a couple of weeks or whatever, these kids they're playing solitaire. They've learned the rules of the game. They can't read the language or anything. They've learned the rules of the game. They're playing Minesweeper and all these kind of things, and they're sending emails and stuff. And these are children, elementary age children that have figured out, whatever it was, Windows 95 or Windows 2000 or something. They've learned this whole thing. And so it kind of shows us, like, we can learn this stuff if we set our minds to it and we're diligent to do it. And I think that's, maybe a good point back to, what the topic was, is like, there's so many things that we can achieve if we are willing to put the time into it. And, stepping out of your comfort zone necessarily, I think, causes the slowdown. But if you're willing to persevere through that, if you're willing to put the hours in, that even things that are strange to us at first will become so familiar that we can't think of a time when we never knew how to do that. When did I not know how to program a Juno 106? Well, when I first got it, but I can't even fathom that moment because it's so dang simple. But
that's it, yeah, just conceptually, that bit right there, without pushing through your comfort zone to learn something new and have it just be absorbed into your thinking. So then the next time, hopefully, you don't have to stop and really think about that so much. And now moved out. Now you've moved the whole thing forward to an extent, right?
I do agree with you guys, though, that, like, sometimes when you're starting from scratch with something and you're awful at it, it can be, especially as I'm getting older and stuff, like, I kind of, like, I don't know if I really want to mess with all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, whereas, like, a younger person might be
hardware sequencers.
So, yeah.
Well, it's been a cool topic. I think we should move on a little bit, just in the interest of sort of moving the show ahead. We got a couple other things we wanted to talk about just to sort of wrap up. But yeah, man, I hope everybody enjoys pushing through their comfort zone, and I hope it's not too terribly uncomfortable, and that you get great results. That's the main thing. Hopefully, successes and results. But yeah, so we want to talk about a little bit of gear for a second?
Yeah, so Let me add this. So we've been trying to talk about this for, I don't know, at least several weeks. We just haven't gotten around to it. And so this is the the new additions to the Korg collection, which is a suite of virtual instruments and effects for your computer and your DAW. And of course, the Korg collection largely is built on replicating in the box many of their classic vintage synthesizers, including all those ones. M1, yes, M1, the Trinity,
Wave. What's the Wave?
A Wave Station,
Triton.
Yeah, the Triton's in there now too, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I said Trinity, but it's a Trident. Yeah,
it's a Trident.
Yeah. So
Triton.
their recent update. So the update before, I think they added what's it called? The 700, whatever it is. Their vintage mono synth. And so they've been doing a lot of old analog synthesizers, and then a few like the Wave Station M1 and Trident that have made it in from the digital era. But
Triton.
Yeah, Trident. Yeah. Whatever I said. Yeah, Trident is the old one. The Trinity and the... Wait, I just totally lost the plot on that. Anyways. So this newest update, so they've been doing what, like once a year or so? Where they've had an update that's added some new stuff. But this is an interesting update in that it's added 3 things that are, from the early 2000s or so?
Yeah.
And that would be the Micro Korg, the Chaos Pad, and the Electribe R. And I was curious about this because this is a world to which I do not belong. I mean, when I was, back in this era when these things were out, I did stuff in the box when I needed synthesizer instruments, and I really wanted a Mini Moog and an Oberheim, but I didn't. And this kind of stuff, like I saw it at Guitar Center, but it just wasn't my world. But I'm kind of curious as to what you guys thought of the stuff, or if the two of you and anybody in the chat, was this kind of the equipment that you guys made music on ever?
Marshall, run with that one.
Yeah, so for me, this was right around the time I started getting into synths, when stuff like the Micro Korg were on sale and the K-Oscillator and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
I never got one for some reason. I did get an MS-2000, which is the same sound engine that I think is in the Micro Korg. And then I also got like a Korg Radius. So I kind of went with the more expensive versions of some of this stuff at the time. So I would still like to get one of those Micro Korgs eventually, because I think they're kind of neat. And you notice that they have wheels and not touch strips for pitch models.
Ding!
Just want to point that out there. It's only been in production for like 15 years. So take note, everyone. The Chaos pads are cool. I've never really understood what somebody would use them for, though. So I've never really had one or really worked on one. And then what's this other one?
The Electribe.
The Electribe is...
Yeah, it's like kind of like a drum machine, right? Isn't that what that is?
Groove box.
Yeah, and Groove Box is kind of not really ever my thing, especially back then. I was more interested in full-on production, so I never really got one of these. So all these are cool. Like, I'm glad they're in here, but I've never really used any of them.
They all they sound great. That's one thing I can definitely say. I love actually the Electribe is cool sounding. I think it's for such it's just an odd little box, but like you can do some really musical things on it, and I just think it sounds really cool. The drums on it in particular, but like it being that it's a groove box, you can do other things, right? But like it's very cool sounding, and then of course they've added features compared to the hardware and whatnot, right? I'm sure can do several more things than the hardware could not. But I think it's a great sounding device, and I do remember those coming out. There's a few different things they had right around that time. Yeah, the Micro Korg, the Electribe. There were some other weird little. There's starting to be some cool, weird little pieces of hardware that were coming out in the early 2000s that started to get.
Also, like the Roland, what's it, SP404 or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
That'd be kind
yeah.
of in the Electribe era, right?
Yeah, I think so. And there were a bunch of things coming out back then, and that was getting my attention because I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. I wonder if we're having a little resurgence of this sort of thinking, but now in this sort of new way of doing it, and hipper. At that point in time, it was, like.
I think that's interesting that you say that, because like for me, when I was getting into it, like I saw this stuff and I thought it was kind of neat, but I was more focused on like, well, look at that V synth over there, or like look at that Nord lead, like what is that, or the Alesis Ion, like what is that? So some of these things, like they kind of seem more like toys to me back then.
And to that point, I never bought any of these. I bought a Korg Triton. That's what I got in 2001 because I thought I might have an opportunity to score a film, and they needed a great accordion sound. No, yeah, it was accordion. They needed a great accordion sound. Isn't that funny? And it had it. Like I auditioned several different sounds, and it also sounded badass on its own. But so yeah, I bought that. I bought a real, actual, whatever 61 note. Keyboard synth, and so I never got any of these. But I just remember when they came out, it sort of to me signaled there's like a thing going on. There's a little bit of a shift. There's some newness to this. There's some freshness to this. And I thought, wow, that's really cool because I hadn't seen like a vocoder in forever, and it was one on the microKORG there, right? So
but I
think a few different things. I liked it.
It was kind of the first synth I think I ever remember seeing with mini keys, though.
Yeah.
Does that sound
well,
right?
and like I said, I never bought them. So I mean, it just seemed to signal a little bit of an era might be starting.
Well, and they hit the nail on the head. They put a great synth engine in there from the MS2000. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever used an MS2000, but they sound awesome, and that's what this is basically. It's a shrunken down MS2000 with a vocoder. I think the MS2000B had a vocoder. Well, no, nice. I even think the original MS2000 had vocoder capabilities, but you had to plug in something to it. The B came with a gooseneck mic, though.
Right. There you go. Right, that's the one I remember seeing. Yeah. Well, so is the MS2000? Did that have rotary encoders, or what was the topology like?
Oh yeah. You say rotary, like they don't stop. You can spin them all day long.
Endless encoders.
Just just knobs rather than sliders.
Oh yeah, rotary. it's all knobs on that synth.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I couldn't remember what it looked like.
Yeah, I've got one. Maybe next week I'll pull it out, show it to you.
Oh yeah,
they're cool. I had to fix the power jack on mine. I had to resolder it. Got all messed up, but I fixed it myself, which is kind of scary. But
nice. There you go. Kind of scary.
Well, yeah, it's not. Me with a soldering iron. I don't know, but I made it work.
Yeah.
I think when I saw this stuff from afar, and kind of my take on the microKORG. I mean, back in the day, so you were talking about mini keys. Mini keys go back at least to the 80s, and I would suspect in toys they would go back to the 70s. I've got some
CZ101 had mini keys, right? So.
Yeah. So, and there's a whole bunch of, like, I've got a couple of Yamahas in the closet. One of those little red keytars. That's a like 2-op FM synth that's got mini keys on that. And so kind of when, long before I had any of that stuff, I kind of saw a mini KORG or microKORG, and I was like, this is kind of what you said, Marshall. Like, is this a toy or is it something serious? I think it's maybe like a little in between, and I didn't know really what one would use it for, and I wasn't into any sort of electronic music other than classic rock type stuff. So yeah, I kind of saw like, well, that would be fun to have, but it wasn't worth spending my money on. And I would have had no idea I'd never heard of an Electribe, until years later. And then I remember the Chaos Pad. I'd never seen or heard of one. But where I heard of it was actually, Matt Bellamy of Muse. He had one had several built into guitars. And so, like the 2000s or so, probably at least by 2010, I would think that you have stuff where he'd be playing things, and then however his guitar was routed, he was using the Chaos Pad as an effects machine. And so he would reach down onto the body. It would be like mounted into, if this were a guitar, it was mounted in right here. And so he'd be playing, and then he would start doing stuff with his hand, doing all sorts of crazy synth and, weird sounds with it. I'm kind of wondering, though, with this package, though, it's like I demoed them. I have the chord collection, but I don't have this latest update. I kind of feel like I don't really need to spend $99 on stuff that I would use very rarely. But it kind of seemed like with the Chaos Pad, it was an interesting thing as a hardware piece when it came out, but I don't have the kind of nostalgia for that.
Well, it is weird seeing it as software, honestly.
Yeah, because it's built around the pad. Now there's some stuff like there's a program that I have. I think it's called Audio Swift, that you can take a trackpad and use it as a controller. You can set up zones for controlling like Spitfire audio stuff, or you can have an XY pad, a giant XY pad. So it's like, well, that could be interesting if you're recording, effects and manipulations of effects. But to be honest, like, why would I learn that piece of software for the Chaos Pad when I have other way more extensive programs of effects and creative effects and modulators and things that if I were going to spend my time on it, I would probably spend it on those instead.
And it is kind of funny to see like a Chaos Pad, which is designed to be, manipulated by your hand, a software version of that. There's a lot of irony to that for me. I just look at it and go, well, or, and so I was wondering if they have a hardware interface where you use a Chaos Pad to control the Chaos Pad.
Yes, that software. That'd be interesting. Yeah. I know because I think with some of the Roland stuff, like if I plug in my DO5, I always want to call it the D50. If I plug in my DO5, I think I can control the D50 plugin, or at least I can transfer patches back and forth, if I remember right. Yeah. So some of that, but just that being a very touch-specific piece of hardware is weird that it's software now, that they have a software version.
Yeah. I would say like playing through the Microkorg and the Electribe, it's funny. Like we think about some of these other things that are classics, like the D50 Roland Cloud synth, or whatever classics they have on your computer now, the Arturia CS80 and stuff, and they sound of a time, but you can use them for modern music pretty easily by just doing your own sound design on it. And when I came to the Microkorg and the Electribe, I'm like, oh gosh, this sounds like 20 years ago, like nothing else. And I was kind of wondering if there was that big of a demand for it, because when I hear it, I don't have the same kind of nostalgia that I do for other eras of music gear. Like, to me, the 2000s were terrible for music gear and music. for me and where I was at.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I think
you can keep your Linkin Parks and all that stuff. I don't want it.
I think that some of the digital synths that came out in the early 2000s are some of the best ones ever. But
what do you think, Marshall? What do you think of the sounds of these though? Like, because when I played like with the Electribe, I'm like, gosh, this sounds.
I don't know.
Dated, and I didn't know if it was like cool yet again, or if it just sounds like dated like 20 years ago, but it not as cool as 30 years ago.
I don't know. Like, I think it depends though, because you gotta remember, like, we're a little bit older, and so I've got some nostalgia for 80s stuff. You know what I mean? But I really grew up in the 90s, so I also have a lot of nostalgia for the 90s. And there's kids that are a little younger than me, even, that fully grew up in the 90s like that. So I can see some of that stuff coming back into vogue because of that. As these kids that grew up in the 90s are hitting their 30s now, maybe have a little nostalgia for some of those cheesy 90s sounds.
Hardware versions of it. Rather software versions of it, right?
And there was a time when I started doing music in the early 2000s, and all my shit sounded 80s. and it was embarrassing. And now, if you sound 80s, like, you're cool. But it wasn't like that for a long time. If you sounded 80s, you were getting laughed at like you didn't know what you were doing. So,
oh my God, yes, the cycles of trends.
The cycles. So yeah, I mean, right now, like, Cryss might not have the affinity for some of that 90s stuff, but like, I could see it coming back at some point. We'll see what happens.
Oh, well, the 90s that I'm looking forward to is, the heavier alternative and grunge stuff coming back.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for that.
Because I was way into that stuff in the 90s. I didn't get into the techno trance stuff till late 90s, but yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting because we've had a rather long run of the 80s, it seems like.
I think extensively long. Like, I'm kind of ready.
Yeah, overly long.
I don't know about you guys. I mean...
Yeah, I'm over it. I was kind of over it when it hit, but yeah.
Didn't I hear this like 20, 25 years ago?
Well, exactly. Wasn't I just playing this music? I mean, a blink of an eye ago anyway. Well, cool. Cryss, there was another... what was the other thing we were going to briefly just hit on?
Oh, yeah,
if we feel like it. I mean, we're at the show moment right now, so we could either wrap it up now, or we could, talk for 5 or 10 minutes. Whatever y'all.
I'm good either way. We can save it to next week if we need to. What do you think, Marshall?
If we can make it quick, let's do it.
Okay, let me pull it up for us.
Make it quick. It's good to see Imperfect on here.
Yeah, what up, Aaron?
Steve, and we got the quality folks in there. Oh yeah, let's talk about that for 2 seconds.
So, of course, this is not new. This is a mutable instrument Platts, which is an oscillator of many different sorts. It's digital, so there's quite a few things it can do. And the interesting thing is that Mutable Instruments is basically shutting down. Emily, as the creator, has said that basically she's done with it. And so she has been such an amazing contributor to electronic music with her modules, released everything as open source, so there's tons of clones of her stuff being made, and yet so many people, myself included, I've got a bunch of Mutable Instrument stuff, go and buy the originals. And something that we were not expecting, like the Beads module was released not too long ago, a year or two ago, which was the update to Clouds, and I think that's going to be the last module if I recall correctly. But this was a surprise in that today it was announced that there is new firmware for Platts. And I think I've got, let me see here.
It looks pretty wicked. It looks like it's got a lot of great new options, a lot of new sounds.
So these are the things that's added. I'll just read a little bit. This is from Synth Anatomy's article. According to Emily, she had this update ready for release a long time, but was still waiting for a reason. She wrote, I'm releasing this firmware update with a couple of things I kept under my hat throughout 21 and 22, just in case clones competition would start being a problem. And so we have these updates. It adds classic wave shape with built-in switchable 24 decibel or 12 decibel filter, phase distortion and modulation, a 2-voice, 6-operator DX7 style FM synthesizer with 32 presets. Fantastically, you can transfer 32 custom patches in TX7 SysX format into the module via the timbre input. Wave train synthesis, which with continuous interpolation between 8 2D terrains, plus the option to import custom wave train via the timbre input. String machine emulation with stereo filter and chorus, and 4 variable square voices for chords and clockable arpeggios. And I think we can all go, damn, that's one hell of an update.
I mean, they knocked it out of the park. I think they're making a statement. That's what I think.
Man, they did everything, including throwing in the old DX7 kitchen sink in there.
Yep.
We got to say,
like last gasping breath, I guess, from good old Mutable Instruments.
Throw DX7 into it.
Yeah,
come on.
even a whatever 10 HP Eurorack module still easier to program.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding,
No
right?
kidding.
It's already got more controls on it than a DX7. Look at that.
Well, I own a Platts,
Not
and
brown.
I
So-
intend to use this update, but it did say in one of the earlier things I read about it, and this was just a few days ago, they were saying it's still not exactly rock solid yet. So upload this and install it at your own risk. And I was like, I'm about to go play a show. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, no.
I'll have to. I'll be waiting till after Christmas and New Year's sometime. Then I'll gingerly walk out to the edge. And
Make sure
see.
everyone else
I'm
is
surprised,
prepared
Tim, after all that you've gone through with the gig. I'm like, I thought this would be the first thing you do. I'm going to build an hour worth of music on this new firmware.
Yeah, that's not rock solid. That's just what I need.
Come on,
Yeah.
you gotta step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, well, I have, my friend. I have indeed. And it's right back there. That whole bane of my existence and that Machine Plus back there.
So I know Steve Connolly went and bought one today. So just to be able to grab it. And anybody that wants the originals probably better do it sooner than later, as they're not going to be in production. Which is a bummer. Yep. I kind of hope that maybe she'll reconsider or sell the company and stay on as the software designer. Designer, like design modules, but not deal with any of the other stuff. But
there hasn't really been anything addressed about what her future plans are, right? So I mean, she may have other ideas in store.
She really exemplifies somebody that is not doing it for the business, the money, but is doing it because she wants to make great art in the form of these modules. And I really do appreciate that. And I hope, I wish her the best. I hope, whatever she does in the future is going to make her very happy and fulfilled, because she's made a lot of us very happy.
And on that note, we shall wrap up our show. It's been a good one, man. It's always good. I think they're always good. I love learning from you guys and learning from people in the chat room and having interesting questions, and it always pushes me to think deeper, and I just appreciate it. So real quick, if you could just give real quick encapsulations. Cryss, what do you have coming up this week?
Playing bass. Hopefully y'all have time to make some music with it.
Sweet. Mr. Marshall.
So I'm gonna play around with this sequencer a little bit. See if we can wrap up that intro tune, get that going, and
yes,
that'll be my weekend covered.
Nice. Yep, that's kind of about mine too. And yeah, I'd love to get back to that little intro tune. That'd be awesome. So hopefully we can push that pile forward and move that ahead. Cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here, and we will see you same time next week.
Next week, everybody.
So long.
Bye, guys.